maybe we should get started. Just making sure that we have time for our busy agenda. So, Liselotte, if we can the next slide, I will just briefly mention this very distinguished panel of guests. We have Dr. Annette Keri Pearlson. We Chair Annette Bente Sollid Storehaug, Chair Annette Jan Wäreby, Ned and President Martin Althen, Liselotte Engstam, that is the Chair from Board's Impact Forum, also herself Chair, and Ned, and me, myself, and I, the Operations Director for Board's Impact Forum, and also Ned. We will later on have a bit more of detailed bios as we go. But if we jump into the agenda, so just to give you a bit of an overview of what we can expect from this session today, we will start with some really interesting insights on boards, cyber resilience by Dr. Keri Pearlson. Then we are going to have different perspectives from chairs and Neds with Jan Wäreby, Bente, Sollid, Storehaug, and Martin Althen. And after we have a very short poll, we go into breakout rooms to discuss these topics and to discuss the insights coming from the poll. Then we come back, we have some feedback on our discussions. We discuss a bit further these topics, and then we are going to have some conclusions by Oba from ILA, and then it's time to close off. If we can get the next slide.
Can we just ask everybody to mute themselves?
Thank you. So it would be very good. the mute is very much on point here. It would be very good if you could be muted during this first part, during the presentations, but you're more than welcome to share if you have any questions or insights that you want to bring up later on in the discussion and in the panel. I will be moderating those comments. And we are going to record this first part of the webinar. Of course, we don't record what's happening in the breakout rooms. So if you have any technical difficulties, just email us to our general email. Moving forward, I just wanted to say a very short introduction, very few words on Board's Impact Forum. So the Climate Governance Initiative is a global initiative that mobilizes board directors in many different countries. And it's an initiative coming from the World Economic Forum. So Board's Impact Forum represents this initiative for the Nordic countries. So we follow the principles for effective climate governance that are presented in this charter. So here in the Nordic, we focus on sustainability, not just climate, but a bit wider topic. And we are partners with the majority of the board networks, reaching out to 5 countries, over 10K board directors. And you're more than welcome to reach out to us if you want to collaborate in any way. And today it's a very special day because, if we can move to the next slide, we are doing this in collaboration with ILA, which is the board director network in Luxembourg. We're very happy about this collaboration here today. To look a little bit at who are you, the participants for this session. So we have 40% participants, 30% from Luxembourg, and 30% from the rest of the world, making up for 17 countries. And now it's time that we start jumping into a few insights. And for that, I will call Liselotte Engstam, our chairperson of the board.
Thank you so much, Fernanda, and warm welcome, everybody. I will say to start with that those of you who are in Sweden will know that I'm working on a board that is right now under a severe ransomware attack. I will not comment that in this meeting, but it adds to my insights on how important this topic is and how we really need to find even more ways to actually govern, but also find ways to practice together with our teams. So we also asked you to respond to a survey that we're doing together also with MIT Sloan and together with ILA. And we are super glad that many of you have answered that. We will use some of that data here, and we will align it with the board dilemmas that we are finding with our boards and board members. And the first one is really how hard it is to be effective in cyber risk management, with the dilemma about how to understand this really complex area, but not the least to judge the risk and judge the ability to be resilient. And as you can see in your answers from this survey, about half thinks that you have a capability to oversee your cyber resilience, and about half is a bit more unsure. Another really important topic area is the complex communication that is going on during a cyber incident. And there's a lot of organizations involved. There's a lot of levels involved. And it is a dilemma for boards to understand how to properly ask for the right information and be involved in the right times. The third area here is the lack of practice in incident response. And as you can see from your response, about 20% of you are practicing, the rest of you are not. And knowing what I know, I have practiced, and you still need to be even more practicing. That is a very important area. In the other three really important dilemmas that we have as board directors, it's the evolving nature of cyber threats. Actually being able to know when certain things take off, and what we're standing for now with AI coming in, it's really an area we need to find ways to understand better. And we also need to find ways to balance the cybersecurity investments. So for most of us, it's actually very hard to judge. Are we doing enough? Are we paying enough on making ourselves protected? And how do you judge that? And what of the part of that would you put in insurance coverage if you can get one? And of course, the liability that we have and the regulatory compliance. And one of the big issues in that is that many of us sit on international companies where the regulatory compliance are different in different jurisdictions. So as you can see, one of the key topics and the discussion we have and what we're going to try to get to understand better, which is also evolving, is a cyber scorecard for boards, not a cyber scorecard for management, not a cyber scorecard for operation, but a cyber scorecard for boards. What should it be on that? And what kind of areas should we have on that, even if it's a bit different? And as you can see, about 25% of you think that you have good KPIs that gives you insight to guide. And about 75% of us actually needs better data, which I think is really flowing well into our fantastic chance to collaborate with MIT Sloan and Dr. Keri Pearlson. And Keri has a really interesting background, as she's also a practitioner, and she has worked in the industry in executive positions, and she's now leading a an entire consortium and research group that is focusing in on cybersecurity, but also particularly on cybersecurity for boards. And she's herself a board director at several companies, at Barracuda Networks, TMF Health Quality Institute, Scen Privata, and a number of non-profits. She's definitely a thought leader in the area, and she has written several articles in HBR and others. We had one of these as pre-read. We will share more of that. We are so glad to have you, Keri, and I'll let you start to share from your side. Warm welcome, Keri.
Thank you, Liselotte. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. And you can see the slides?
We can.
Okay, great. I think we're ready to go. Thank you for that introduction. I'm just delighted to both be here and know about your group and how important your group feels the cybersecurity issues are, not just when you're in the middle of a crisis, but enough to think about it ahead of time and start to prepare. And I think that's what many boards are trying to figure out, where to go and how to do it. So I'm just delighted to share a couple of our research projects here from MIT Sloan today in my slides. So let me go ahead and jump right in. I'm take about 15 minutes to share a few different items. So if it feels like the fire hose approach, that's the way we do things at MIT. You can see my picture here, so I'll remind you where you are, but everything at MIT seems to be lots of information very, very quickly, and then you guys ask questions later so we can dive deeper if necessary. So we asked the question, what role does the board of directors play in keeping the organization secure? And we learned that the board of directors have, of course, fiduciary and oversight responsibility. That's nothing new to anybody here. But all board members must be knowledgeable participants in cyber risk management discussions. That doesn't mean you're the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer. It also doesn't mean that you're the Chief Technology Officer. But if you don't have a knowledge about what questions to ask, then you're really not even able to participate in the discussions. So we've written a number of articles published at Harvard Business Review, some at World Economic Forum, some in Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Sloan Management Review, even some academic journals on these topics. Today, I'm going to start with just a couple of ideas from a few of these articles. So first of all, we think that boards need an appropriate framework for thinking about your oversight activities, and we like this one. This is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST framework. Some of you may have seen this in other forms before. It's recently been updated to version 2.0 with the yellow circle in the middle. But the main idea here is when you think about your cybersecurity strategy, you want to think about 6 different areas of investment. Identify, how do we know what the key, the crown jewels are? How do we know what threats we're worried about? Just identify the field, understand kind of what the key things are you want to protect and secure. Of course, we'd like to secure everything, but just like your home, where you buy insurance for some of the more valuable pieces of your personal life, your corporate life is the same thing. Your company can't insure everything at the same level. You have to make the tough decisions, or your operating leaders have to make the tough decisions. You want to identify what the crown jewels are. You want to understand protection. You want a strategy for how do you protect those crown jewels and other assets in your company. You want a program of detections. How do you know if there's a cyber breach? We know that in many cases, cyber breaches are in our systems for months, maybe years before they're activated. And that's because malware can be inserted a number of different ways, and it may not even be turned on until some incident or some other kind of trigger. So you want to know how the organization is detecting when there's malware. You want to understand how to respond, and those are what some people are doing right now with the breach that's going on in Sweden. You're responding. What are you doing about it? What's the response plan? And this is where practice comes in. And you want recovery plans. Business recovery plans tend to just not be adequate for a cyber breach. So you want to make sure as a board member that you've looked at what are the recovery plans, or you've asked your operating managers, what are the recovery plans in a cyber context? For example, quick story here. One of the companies we looked at had really robust business recovery plans. And when they had a cyber breach, where do you think those recovery plans were? Well, they were on the computer that was locked up because of the ransomware attack. nobody had access to it. And nobody had thought about the fact that if they couldn't get to the computer, they might not have their business recovery plans. Turns out that one enterprising administrative assistant had a file drawer full of paper that everybody had laughed at because she had put everything on paper. Well, it turns out she had a copy of the business recovery plans, and that became ground zero for their recovery. So the point here being that you want to think about your business recovery plans in the context of a cyber breach, because they might be a little different. And finally, this yellow circle in the middle, govern, that's the new one. That's really the stuff where the board comes in. What are the governance processes? How are you thinking about governing? Many countries have put in regulations now or have requirements or rules. I know the SEC in the United States just implemented a whole set of rules for governance and oversight. And so there needs to be some investment there. So if you're thinking about cybersecurity at this most senior level, these are the 6 areas that you want to ask questions about. You want to understand what the company's doing. Well, our research showed that while we all understand that we want to invest in protection and all the other pieces of that, most organizations spend most of their resources, 80% in some cases, on protection plans, and maybe 20 to maybe 25% of their time and energy and resources on response and recovery. And that's just not good enough. That has to change. My personal feeling is we can't protect ourselves enough. You can't be 100% secure. And if you can't be 100% secure, what do you do? And that's where my research comes in. We think protection is different. You need to be resilient. And we think resiliency is the mindset that senior leaders and board of directors needs to take. Protection is a different way of thinking of a response and of how you invest. But resilience means that you're assuming the bad guys will get into your systems and you have plans in place to minimize the damage. Now, of course, protection is a piece of resilience, but my vision for resiliency, as you can see on this screen, is that an organization should be able to weather an attack, not lose a minute of time, not experience any disruption of operations, not see any additional financial costs, no loss of data, and no impact to our reputation, and not experience any violation of compliance rules. Now, that's a vision. I'm pretty sure that that's impossible to achieve, especially today. But if we don't have a vision of what we're shooting for, how do we know if we're even on the road to get there? But if we're thinking about resiliency, wouldn't this be awesome if we could take an attack and nothing happened to us? The article we published in Sloan Management Review had a set of activities that we call Designing for Resilience. It comes from some work done by our research partner on organizational resilience. And the main idea here is resilience is the ability to anticipate then and experience a shock, in this case, a cyber attack, absorb it without significant loss, then respond in a manner that brings the organization back to equivalent or perhaps even higher performance. And you can see this picture here. The purple line is the company that's not resilient, and the green is the company that is resilient. The recovery line is much sharper. They recover faster. And in this case, they recover at a higher level of performance than the non-resilient companies. Okay, so how do we know if our organization is cyber resilient? I'm kind of turning now to this idea of a dashboard or a scorecard. So in my research and the work I've done with the boards I'm on, most of the time when we get reports at the board level on cybersecurity, we get reports around things like how many people failed a phishing exercise, or what is our investment in identity and access management, or when did we last do a pen test, or what kind of controls do we have in place, and what % of our controls do we think need to be refreshed in the next year or so. Really, really important questions, really important operational data, but not strategic data, not for oversight, not for fiduciary responsibility of boards. That's the second, maybe third level discussion that I want to have as a board member. I want to know what are the biggest risks to our company. And they usually fall in one of these 5 categories. Technology, maybe our technology will fail or be compromised. Financial, maybe it'll cost us money through ransomware or through insurance or through recovery. Organizational, maybe our people are the biggest risk. In many research projects, we've seen many articles, we've seen people telling us that people are the biggest risk in our organization. Maybe it's regulatory. We get fined if we do something that that compromised our protective systems. Or maybe it's supply chain. Maybe we're worried about our suppliers coming in bringing in or introducing some sort of cyber incident. So we built this balanced scorecard really to use to govern and manage cybersecurity risks. It has 4 quadrants and then one in the center, a financial assessment, a technological assessment, an organizational assessment, and a supply chain assessment. And then some overall assessment of what is resilient, how resilient are we? What I'm going to do is spend just a minute describing what a quadrant might look like, and then show you the whole picture. And then we can move on to the rest of the webinar today. So for each quadrant, I see 3 different parts. On the left-hand side here, I see some sort of stoplight indicator, yellow, red, yellow, green. That is an indicator of the quantitative assessment that our operational managers make every day about this particular quadrant. It could be about controls. It could be some framework your organization is already using to manage their cyber successes and the ROI of their cyber investments. But every organization has some way to measure. It might even be % of controls, but there's some indicator that's quantitative. What's new here, what the new idea is this qualitative component on the other side of the quadrant of the box. And what I want to see is I want my operational managers, my CEO, my CISO, my CIO, I want them to tell me, what do you think is the biggest risk right now? And what are we doing about it? I want their qualitative assessment. I don't want to have to make the qualitative assessment. I will have an opinion, but I want them to tell me, what do you see as the biggest risk to this quadrant, in this case, financial, and what are you doing about it? So in my example, we said the biggest risk for the financial sector in this company might be the loss of market momentum due to increased possibility of stolen IP. Okay, if you think that stolen IP is causing a loss of market momentum, or could be, first of all, how high a risk is this? What's the magnitude? How likely is it? Is this something that's really likely, not really likely? And what's the business impact? Is it high, medium, low? And then what's your action plan? What are we doing about it? What have you invested in to manage this risk? We know when we manage risk, we mitigate, we transfer it through insurance, we absorb it. We may have other strategies for managing risk, but I want to know what the operational managers think. So this is a qualitative assessment by operational managers. This is a quantitative assessment based on whatever your organization's using at the time. And you can see that this expands into each quadrant, and this would be the conceptual framework for board reporting of cyber resilience in our organizations. Again, our job is oversight and fiduciary responsibility, not day-to-day operational management. But I want to know what the day-to-day operational managers, the leaders, are doing. We've written about this in an article at Harvard Business Review. We just got a paper published in a conference about this that goes into way more detail. Of course, we made this article available to you. There's more available on our MIT CAMS website. But this is the conceptual framework that I want to present today. We have a number of articles on resiliency and questions to ask at your next board meeting. For example, we took the NIST model and we created 7 questions you could literally ask at your next board meeting to understand how your organization is thinking about this particular framework. Your operational managers may have a different framework, and if they do, then you could take these questions and translate them into questions that correspond with what your organization uses. We also wrote an article about practice, about tabletop exercises, about response and recovery. And we asked, are cyber attacks are inevitable? Is your company prepared? And these practice sessions don't just happen at the board level, they happen all throughout the organization. But in particular, at the board level, if we don't know what our role is, if we don't know how we're supposed to respond when the inevitable happens, we're going to be in much worse shape and much less resilient than if we had practiced. Okay, so let me just conclude quickly with who we are. I'm a research group at MIT called CAMS, Cybersecurity at MIT Sloan. We are dedicated to the organizational, managerial, strategic governance, the business side of cyber. We're part of the Sloan School of Management, and we have a number of other research projects, not just the 4 or 5 I've listed here. You're welcome to go to our website and take a look at our research page, at our In the Press page, and see more about what we're doing. We look at things like risk management, cyber physical systems, cyber governance, resilience, building an organizational culture. And we have a number of research projects in various stages of the research process. These are the companies that support our research. Of course, if your company's interested, I'd be happy to talk with you about that. We're a consortium, and so we offer activities for this group, much like the board forum that we're on today, and also insight and opportunity to participate in our research itself. That's what I got. Liselotte, back to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing that and framing our discussion. And you will also come back and be part of the panel. I actually thought we would now launch a little poll for the participants, because we want to know your perspective now. The questions are really, our board is confident in judging the cyber resilience. We are aware of the budget and we regard it as sufficient. We are practicing cyber incidents, and one of my companies take care of my computer and IT tools and ensure that I'm, as board member, is cyber safe. So we'd love to hear. Can you see the response? Yeah, I can see that people are starting to fill in. So it would be great. Meanwhile, you are answering that. I will take up who and share who we will be listening to now. I'll let you continue to answer that while we listen to the perspectives, and we'll come back to the insights. So we have three very experienced board directors, but also experienced in terms of the companies they're sitting in, the challenges they are also meeting. So I thought we start with you, John. You are with a long background from Ericsson, and you are now you're chairing actually the Research Institute, but you're also a NED yourself on the I don't even know how to say that, but the economic credit for Sweden to help companies. You're on
Export Credit Agency.
Thank you. And you're also on Tubi, which is a very interesting listed tech companies, and you're on several more. So we're delighted to have you, and we look forward if you start with your perspective first, and we come back to the others.
Okay, so let's try to be crisp and practical. First, I think one important discussion on the board level itself is, of course, who's in the board. I'm very much a promoter that a board should not be a group of specialists. It should be experienced generalists, but I think it's super important in these days to really have at least one individual that really knows the digital world, which expands into cyber that we talked about today, cybercrime and so on, and also, of course, obviously into AI. So you have that covered in the board a bit more hands-on. I think that's super important. When it comes to cyber resilience, and I'll come back to a bit what we do in RISE, but before that, I mean, it's of course a board job, but as always, most of the work comes into the management of the company. And I think I have a few key takeaways I'm always use. I mean, the first question from the board to ask management is, who is it in the organization that can pull the plug on the IT system and the shit hits the fan? It's pretty good to have that decided so you can do it in a swift and competent way. I think that's super important. The other one for resilience is to ahead of time secure that you have some support signed up, both on the technical side from an IT or cyber support point of view, but also have signed up so you have help with crisis communication. That's really important. Obviously, and I think Keri, you mentioned that, to have the routine when it happens, to have that planned and documented. And don't forget that sometimes it's good to have things on paper, as you mentioned. It's when everything is in the system and you can't get up on the system, it's a bit tough. So just to have that routines in place, and obviously also trained all the involved, and that's typically the whole management team and much more people than that, but it starts with the management team. So you prepare for it to happen, and I think you can compare it. In the old days we had fire drills. We probably still have that now as well, but not as often. But you should have this drill instead, because it's as severe, if not severer. But coming back then to the board level, even if it's good to have an expert in the boardroom in this area, and I think Keri, you mentioned that quickly there, that this area is, you have to have a basic knowledge across the board, and that of course takes some education, time spent with the whole board to get up to speed in this area, and of course have a basic understanding what management have to do, but more on the bigger scheme of things, what's the experience, and also keep updated because things move all the time. Just mentioning briefly what we're doing in RISE. Of course, we're doing a lot of research in cybersecurity. We're all involved with all the national agencies and have a fairly heavy competence in this area. And one thing we've done a bit more hands-on is we invested a couple of years ago in what we call a cyber range. So we can build up a complete IT environment and demonstrate and actually also test different company softwares that we emulate into this system, and how it can resist hackers, how hackers get in, and what actually can happen in the systems. And we have this set up as kind of an advanced training center. So you can both do it with management teams and come there and you do the drill, work out the processes and so on. And but also we have board member trainings for the ones of you that are a bit closer to Stockholm than some other of you, and we will send out some material afterwards where you have contact points and so on to use that, because I think this whole training part, both of the personnel and of the board, is really important. Was that brief enough?
That is very good. Thank you so much. I know we can all talk very lengthy, but we thought we'd get your perspective. So thank you so much, John, for sharing that, and also letting us know kind of on a very practical level, what do you need to do, what you need to ask for. So we are bringing in our next presenter that will give her perspective, and that is Bente. Oops.
Yeah.
And Bente is a chair and NED in a number of companies, both listed and private, and has worked with digital for quite a long time. But is also, and I forgot to say that about Jan. So Jan is on our strategic advisory board, and Bente is actually on our supervisory board for Board's Impact Forum. Thank you so much for that, Bente. Over to you.
Yes, thank you, Liselotte, and thank you to Keri for bringing so much valuable insight to this webinar. I was reflecting a little bit of you said that the boards have an oversight responsibility, and that the board should be knowledgeable participants in discussing cybersecurity. I've always been the digital board member in the boards, and everyone should know finance to be in the board. Everyone should be able to participate in a finance discussion. But my experience is that when it comes to tech and when it comes to digital and the digital maturity among the board members, that's very often, as Jan said, one specialist or one should be digital. it's very hard to discuss with someone when there is just one person that should be the expert. Think about if one should be finance expert and the rest of the board do not really are not really able to discuss the finance challenges. That's really hard. So being able to judge the risk when there is low tech competence, low AI competence, low digital competence in the board, that's a really, really difficult situation, and it's a really hard dilemma for so many boards. So when you are talking about the digital, the cyber scorecard for boards, that's something I really miss when it comes to discussing cybersecurity, because where are we? Where are the challenges? What area do we need to improve? That's the really hard. That's the really hard discussion, and of course, in all the companies that I'm in the board, there is good and really good competence in the management, in the IT departments, how to handle the risk. But we are meant to have the oversight responsibility. And when we cannot really ask the questions and judge the risk, that's to me, it's so important that we educate the board members more in every tech questions and every tech competence that the board need to put up the good way forward. We just had a report launched in Norway from PricewaterhouseCoopers, which said that the cyber attacks, they actually occur through third parties or subcontractors. And we have always spent a lot of time in the boards to try to educate the employees and try to make them aware of what can be the threat to the company and how can the employees actually behave, and what kind of knowledge should they have on the cyber threats is around. But when it comes to 6 of 10 attacks actually comes from third parties or subcontractors that show us a picture that this cybercrime is really more complex than we are aware of. So awareness and training, how to understand and how to actually building insights into advanced technologies, how they can threat us, but also how they can help us to be more proactive and more strategic. I think tech competence more and more important for the years to come. And I don't know if it's but I never been in a company board where we had a serious attack. That's maybe a experience I have. Apple Music Siri is connecting. But we have been in boards with daily attempts. But never ever a serious ransom attack or a serious attack that has closed down any system. But being in a board where we suddenly had to meet up and to invest in software because we see security holes in subcontractors or software companies' software. That's something that we have experienced more than one time.
Okay, thank you so much, Bente. I think it's very educational to be in attacks. I actually been in several. It's of course us also that needs to help all of the rest on what's going to happen. And as Keri said, none of us will be able to do a perfect protection. Everybody will have to get prepared to be involved. So we now have thank you so much, Bente. Very nice and very, I like that you're also very open and transparent on how hard it is, even for you who has a bit more maybe technical depth. So we are delighted to introduce to you Martin Althen. And Martin is mainly in an operational role. He's the president of Securitas Digital, which is one of the largest companies in the world, actually. But he's also a NED on companies, and he has the fantastic opportunity to reflect on this issue from two dimensions, both serving the board, but also when he's asking the same questions himself. So warm welcome, Martin, over to you.
Thank you very much, Liselotte, and thank you also to Keri and Bente and Jana. I think there has been a lot of insightful things shared here today. A lot of knowledge being shared. I thought that, well, unfortunately, I have also, like Liselotte, been part of a lot of hands-on experiences with cyber threats and cyber incidents attacks. I'm working with security questions broadly in my daily job, basically, and I see that the last few years, cybercrime has just escalated. It continues to escalate. I would say the last year, or perhaps the last 3 quarters, it has really exploded, I would say, in terms of the amount of attacks and also the seriousness and persistency of attacks. And I think if you haven't yet been exposed to a breakthrough, unfortunately, you most likely will, or you're very lucky in the next 12, 18 months. So I like what Keri talked about, resilience. Of course, you need to have the right security levels in place so that you make it as hard as possible and difficult as possible for the intruder to get in. But I think you need to really prepare for that. You actually will have a breakthrough. And from a board perspective, I think what I see so far, it's a difficult question. It's being treated as a specialist question, something that is handled by the IT department or by the audit committee or by someone who is supposedly the expert on the topic. So how to get the board engaged in the question? I think that's a key question, how to get it interesting and approachable from a board perspective. And if we continue from what Keri said, that assume that the bad guys will get in. One interesting question that I found will engage people is that, well, why do they want to get in? Because there are actually several dimensions and layers of reasons behind that. And I'll just share 3 typical reasons. The most obvious one that we all see, of course, is that they're in there for the money. That's the big driver, and that has really grown over the past few years. It's a tremendous amount of money to extort from cyber criminality. It's just a natural evolution of typical crime that has moved into the digital world there. And if you divide that, it's basically 2 or maybe 3 dimensions of that. One is that you are exposed through a third-party liability. You have a supplier of some kind, and you will be affected by that third party. So you have to have the right routines in place for resilience, etc., and the right also requirements when you engage in contract with your suppliers, of course. Then you have the random attacks that go out, the broad sweeps from crime syndicates like Akira and other ones. Typically, they get a very low success rate, but they are successful with companies who have a low security posture, who don't have the right security procedures and first-line defense up in the place where they need to be. The last category is targeted cybercriminality. So there you have a criminal gang that has really targeted you for one or other reason. And of course, big companies like Securitas and what maybe other companies you sit in, they are typically being associated. They have big money to pay out, big implications of a ransomware attack or something like that, and you are then likely to be targeted and in order to try to exploit and extort a lot of money out of you. So that's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is and driver for cybercrime is to acquire IP. Intellectual property, typical industry espionage. Are you a company that holds significant intellectual property? Someone wants to acquire this in order to gain an advantage on in the industry, for example. The third reason is actually, it's driven by activism, and in some cases borderline terrorism, is to hurt your brand and or reputation. And those two last categories, to attack your brand and reputation, acquire IP, has a strong connection also to physical security. Because even if you have the highest guard up from a cyber resilience perspective and cybersecurity perspective, one of your entry points, if you're really high in intellectual property and high in your brand value, one of the best attack surfaces is actually through one kind of social engineering or actually physical intrusion to implant a backdoor into your cyber world there. So from that perspective, I would really like to encourage everyone to look at cybersecurity and physical security as something that hangs together, because the one is an opener to the other, and the weakest point in that link is where you will have an opportunity for breach to be exploited. And physical security, and if you are typically one of these high IP or high brand, one of the things that I would recommend is to actually leverage intelligence resources. Because there is always signs in the underworld, in the digital underworld of the world, that can give you signals if you are of interest. If you're of interest for activist group, for terrorist group, or if you attract any interest because you have an intellectual property or product that is really unique in the market and there. So there is different ways to understand your risk level, your likelihood of being attacked. And I think that taking this angle on the discussion, that is typically something that engages people. It engages senior executives, including board members, because all of a sudden you take the focus away a little bit from the cybersecurity tools or the IT department security posture. It takes a risk perspective. You talk about IP, you talk about brand, reputation, you talk about intelligence, what kind of interest are you attracting in the dark world there. And I think getting this engagement and interest from the board, that's a good starting point for then getting a board that can help you then in, okay, we understand this is for real, what can we do to help? So that's what was the angle I wanted to talk in addition to all the great things that we heard here today. So thanks for me.
Thank you so much, Martin, and thank you also for the very insightful linkages also to the physical side, which is easy to forget when we're talking about how they are attacking the digital, but it's also a question of how do they get in. And also, as you said, if something is too well protected, then they have to go through the physical side. So it definitely fits together. Thank you so much. We will come back and have you on the panel. I will now end the poll and we will share the result, which I think is very telling from where we are. And I think you can see the results now. Can somebody nod? Can you see the results? Yeah. So on the first question, I think we can see that are we able to judge our company's cyber resilience? And we have a whopping 85% that is kind of neutral to disagree. If we understand the budget, we have a little more that we agree on, but still very low. Our board is practicing. No, we have half of us are not yet involved in practicing. And one of my companies take care of my situation, which is very interesting, I think. So I thought that was a good thing to bring up. With more than half of us is actually our own CIOs in this world. So even if we sell them as direct access, we are a very interesting point in ourselves. We will now have a breakout room discussion. And of course, I'll just start to say everything that's said in the breakout room. Of course, will be secure with yourselves. And we ask everybody to agree to that. And what we want you to discuss is, how do you judge your cyber resilience now? And are you involved in practice handling? And any good questions or practices that you have been part of that you think is valuable. We ask that when you come in, try to appoint a chair to lead and a vice chair to help report back, which will be a very short, just a key comment in the chat. Then start, of course, give yourself 1 minute to be introduced to each other. Do I have any questions before we open the rooms? You will be there for 15 minutes. We will bring you back again. We know it's short, but it's usually also a very valuable time. Any questions before we open? So try to put on your camera now when we open the room so you can see each other. Thank you so much for coming back promptly. And what we want you to do is the people reporting back, if you can put just a sentence on anything that you either found very insightful in your rooms or similar to what we discussed, or a board practice you think somebody should try. And then I just randomly pick up, maybe I can pick up, let's see, somebody from room 4. Catherine, Oban, Esosa, Patricia, what were your reflections?
Yeah, so I will be the reporter.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there were let's say different type of companies regulated, so company considered in board sitting from different aspects. The 2 key lessons we raised was first the capacity to really concretely test the awareness of people, especially for phishing. Maybe you already were part of a phishing testing campaign, which is and especially for everyone, especially for directors and also executive. That's the first point. And the second was about the what Martin mentioned about the why, doing a wide prospective exercise in order to for any type of company, even if you are in a company where small and where you could not make direct link with digital specific and so on. That's the two key lessons.
Thank you so much. And I hope the rest of you can put your key lessons in the chat. And now I like to go back to our panel and also have you have both been part now of rooms and you also have your knowledge points. I actually like to start out with a bit broader because I think we're now zooming in on cyber as a key risk area, but how do you see that cyber is part of actually the overall risk evaluation for companies? How is it placed there and how is it discussed in the overall risk assessment? What do you say, Bente?
Well, it's in most of the companies that I'm in, it's placed in the audit committees to actually oversee the situation and the investments. And what we discussed in room number 1 is that instead of, I think if you compare cyber crime with a technology like AI has entered the boardroom because that's seen as something positive that can be more, the companies can become more profitable and more effective, and it can also contribute to value creation. But I think everything that is connected to cybersecurity, that's regarded as a cost. Still as a cost, and it's investments that we need to actually improve, and it's not contributing to the financials. And if you are lucky, you don't have any ransomware to pay or cost to restore systems. But I think it's a different view on that tech area than techs that are actually contributing to value creation and efficiency. So,
Keri, go ahead.
I just want to jump in on that because it's a really important point. I've been working on a project to change the conversation from cyber as an infrastructure investment, i.e. a cost, to as a strategic advantage, i.e. something positive, something that we could really help enhance our bottom lines with. We looked at this last year and we had a couple of examples. I know Apple computers is all over the world, and so most of you are probably familiar with Apple. And I know that in their advertising, for example, they've been advertising privacy as a reason to buy their phones. So playing on this idea that privacy, which of course is a sister topic of cyber, something that they're trying to compete on, if you will, maybe in a subtle sort of way. It's a little hard for some companies to see where they might articulate a competitive advantage. But as we start to see more of what you mentioned, Berta, the supply chain issues, if you could prove to your suppliers in some way that they were more secure doing business with you, or your customers, they were more secure doing business with you than with some of their the alternatives, then all of a sudden cyber becomes something that more than just the CIO and the CISO want to talk about. So we've been trying to articulate how to do that. We've been playing with some of the models from Harvard Business School, like competitive advantage models and 5 forces models and stuff many of you have probably seen over your years as managers and executives. But I think that's a really interesting angle that we don't quite have the answer to yet, but that I think is something really important, so that more than just our technology managers really want to understand how we might use our investments in cyber as a competitive advantage.
Right. Thank you so much for adding that. And I know that you have more views, but I actually thought I'd squeeze in this other thing around the cybersecurity scorecard and how that are helping or could help our judgment also on preparing, also on the resilience side. So I know, Martin, you have experiences on that. Can you share something?
Of course, and we heard from Keri about the scorecard there, and I would really like to advocate a scorecard. And why not the scorecard Keri proposed? It's a model that's vetted by MIT and Keri there. But the most important thing I think is to have a scorecard, and I think there are a couple of things that it needs to contain. It needs to be more than one dimension. You have the operational dimension, of course, with what you typically would expect on cyber, how you are protected in endpoint protection, AD, backups, etc., etc. But it also needs to include people dimension, awareness broadly in your company, but also competency in your specialist layer. Also needs to include the customer dimension, so basically assurance perspective and what support you can give both in terms of on proposals, but also what happens, what you do if something happens. And lastly, but not least, the finance dimension. But for finance, not only the total spend, but also the allocation of funds. So where do you spend your money? I think is and to have that rounded view. But I think also it's key to also have some sort of graded scale. So okay, we are here. The tolerable is here, and we aspire to be here. And then that you can have the discussion that is normalized, and also discussion then on the progress, and then have a clear view on, well, this is tolerable, but it's tolerable in 6 months, and then you need to get there. And that means that it can inform the discussion about allocation of funds. So
and I think that
scorecard, absolutely strong advocate for that.
Yeah, and that thing on some kind of scale is a really interesting thing, because it's not just that you get that scale, you get a debate about the scale as a first instance. And Jan, I wanted to bring you in, because this thing about kind of having a scale, comparing companies, what is your experience and view on that?
In this domain, I think it's I mean, we discussed a bit on the scorecard subject in our group, and it's the most points that came up, it's rather reactive than proactive. And that's, to me, that's the difference of this risk versus other risk, because typically when you identify a risk, then you work to mitigate it happening. But here, kind of the conclusion, what we learn here today and what we see every day is that all we know, of course, we should do all the professional things to mitigate up front. But the really big job is that when the mitigation doesn't work. And all we know that will most probably happen. And then the scorecard has to be, how do you deal with it when it happens? And how are you prepared for that proactively? And that's a bit trickier. It takes quite a lot of work. I think it's a lot to what Martin said, that you at least get it up on the scale, or if it was Keri, so it's being discussed, and you as a group together with management learn.
And if we go into this area around kind of both education, I usually say that always when a new topic comes up, it's a 1-hour presentation of something. And for me, that is not education. So can I hear something about how do you look at education for boards in general, and in this area in particular? Maybe, do you want to start, Jan, on this topic?
No, I mean, I think I think I started up with that. I mean, you need to get everyone in the board up to some level. Then whatever that is, obviously, in if you take RISE, where we obviously now have the cyber range. Obviously, I've spent more than 1 hour on that range together with the board. I mean, so, but we have that as an obvious possibility. But I would say on this subject, I mean, I guess many of you have different type of education days or these type of things in the boards, and to secure I always have AI on the agenda, and cyber is on the agenda as well. I think that's it's a must these days, because so much happens over time and so much new learnings comes. You just have to have it on the agenda.
The paper kit that comes to your teaching for boards and for executives at MIT.
Yeah,
are they sent by them? Are they taking that initiative themselves, or is there companies and boards sending them?
Thank you for the opportunity to tell everybody here about that. We have a short 3-day program at MIT that I designed for board members. It fulfills what I mentioned at the first slide, that I think boards need to be knowledgeable participants. And so we go through some of the things I went through in that first lecture. We talk about the NIST model. We talk about tabletop exercises. We talk about resilience. My partner in crime in that program talks about regulation globally, not just in the US, although it's very US centric, but we talk about global issues like GDPR and other issues that have to do with privacy and cybersecurity. Most of the people that we've run it twice. We're about to do a third one in March, and there's 2 this year. One in March, one in the fall, and it's virtual. So you don't actually have to come to MIT to take the class. But our goal is to give board members the language and some of the framework so that they can bring them back to their boards. And so it's about 50-50. And I would also say that participants in the class are probably 75% board members and 25% operating executives who want to know how to talk to board members. So they want to learn how to talk to you. So they come to this class to see what we're teaching, so they know, how to talk to the board members. But the board members that come, I'd say 50-50. They either pay for it themselves or their board pays. But many times it's more than one. And that's what I wanted to say. It's nice to have 1 or 2 or 3, and in some cases even 4 or 5 board members at the same time, so they can, as a group, learn this language and figure out together how to think about what it is. I'll put in the chat a link to the program if anybody's interested.
And thank you for that. And we're also going to put, actually, it gives me a reason now to conclude. I know that we will actually come back and have more webinars on this topic because it's very current. I'm now going to ask our guest Althen to do the conclusion in just a couple of 3 minutes, and then we're going to come back and tell you a bit more on what's happening next. So Althen, thank you so much to the panel. I can't thank you enough. I know I owe you all a lot of things, but also remember that when these things happen, it's also about sharing, learning like this, but actually sometimes it's also just about reaching out to each other. How did you handle this? How do I handle that? So that you also have to learn in the moment. Thank you so much to all participants. We are going to create both a blog post, and we are continuing this as a little research project together with MIT. And many people here will also be adding to that in some format. So thank you so much to the panel. Althen, can you let us know your conclusions?
Yeah, thank you, Liselotte, and thank you everyone for all these very great insights. I will come back on the different dilemmas that were shared at the very beginning with a quick addition. So we started with an ineffective cyber risk management. What could be done at least would be to start, would be to challenge the assessment process and routines and ask for business and stakeholder-oriented impacts. Regarding the dilemma of complex communication during cyber incidents, you could frame delegation and ensure impacts of severity-based escalation to the board or in place, or define it. Ensure also that reporting material and communication links are ready to be activated and that you are involved. the dilemma regarding the lack of practice in incident response, maybe the first things to do, as it was mentioned several times, is to define a policy for a regular fire drill exercise in their life now. And especially including the lessons learned step after each exercise, and have information from the improvement plan, no? Because it's never perfect. So keep learning is very important. Next dilemma is about the evolution of the nature of cyber threats. So the only way to address this is to continuously learn at board level, but also at executive level, because first you are at-risk persons, so at an individual point of view, but also you are accountable for the company. So that's two big reasons. And what above that, very interesting insight from Martin about knowing and learning from the origin and the roots of the threats. So knowing why you could be a target, monitor and understand it. Regarding investments, part of the answer may be how much loss are you ready to accept in case of incidents? So that means risk tolerance to define. Maybe I can add two last points. The first one is that people are the first vector of threats at any level, but they are also your best guardians. So ensure to build the vigilance culture and education at all level and at the core of your cyber strategy. And the last point is about a risk, and we mentioned that a lot. Risk is about what we know, what could happen, but what about the unknown? So that means that we should also turn the shift to a new paradigm, which is the uncertainty based culture, ready culture, I mean. So that means, and it starts at the board level. That means that this is a radical different process than risk management, and it's focused on capacity and crisis-oriented decision-making framework, which is a totally different way of addressing those points. I will stop there because the time is up, but I hope this can help some of you for the future.
Thank you so much, and it's very good to have somebody focused on summarizing for us in the end. Thank you so much, Oban, for that, and also for arranging so that we could collaborate here with all of your Luxembourg NED colleagues. We will just mention a couple of things. We will produce a blog post. We will produce a little report, especially for all of you who have answered. If you haven't answered, you can still go in and answer the survey. It's still open. Going forward, we have a number of interesting webinars for you. So our next webinar and peer exchange, as we're running them, is on risk, opportunity, and strategic integration. And that is on the broader sustainability topic area, not just AI. We are so glad we will have Professor Stanislav Szczeknia joining us for that, and we will have a number of NEDs coming back. On Feb 16, we will have a bit of the focus on the reporting incentive stakeholder exchange. We're super glad to have the former sustainability and communications officer at the Investor, who's now a board member, Viveka Hirdman-Ryrberg, joining us. And we will also have Fredrik Bartsch from the reward value helping us out and sorting out the motivation area. And then we will have an open webinar on boards and generative AI. This is the hardest topic that everybody has on their board agenda right now, struggling with and how to judge. So we have put together, we're both going to have this. We are going to have one more, but we also put together an entire training program. And I know that ILA is also looking to put together trainings on this topic. And on March 26, we are taking the real topic up together with INSEAD, together with our chapters in UK and Hong Kong. And we're actually going to discuss how can chairs foster psychological safety so that you dare to bring up these really hard topics? Sustainability, cyber, the AI, how can they facilitate so that we won't be swept away, but we actually get the right topics on the agenda? And we will discuss that together with three phenomenal chairs, Nicholas Allen, who's chairing both in Hong Kong and UK, Katarina Bunde, who chairs boards both in Sweden and US, and Rolf Pfeiffer, who chairs boards in Germany. You're all very welcome to join the open ones, and you can look at all materials, and you can also look at material for ILA, of course, for the ILA members. And we're looking forward to continue to collaborate, especially around this very tough topic on cyber. I want to extend again my warm thanks for everybody joining and actually sharing and talking about your experiences. This is learning by doing going forward. And I want to thank a very warm thank to Keri for joining us from MIT. Thank you so much. And to the panel, Jan, Martin, and Bente. Thank you so much. Totally invaluable. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.